There we go. Okay. Yes. For some weird reason, some of my images were not loading in the presentation. So we had to stop share, start over. And those are the joys of technology when it works. Okay. I'm just making sure that the chat is activated. So just bear with me. There we go. Excellent. Okay. So first of all, I want to welcome everyone. I don't know where you're from. I don't know if you want to let me know a little bit about you, where you're from, how old your child is, what their favorite food is, and what is the favorite food you would like for them to eat. Because if you are here, you are not alone. And we are all on this, we have all been in the same place at one point. I'm just an earlier version of you because I had the pickiest eater on the planet. If someone could just drop a thumbs up in the chat or just to let me know where they're from, just so that I know for sure that we have a functional chat. Hold on a second here. There's something in my Q&A. Chat is disabled. Yes, no, I fixed it. Okay, so I'm going to say that you can hear me and that otherwise you will let me know. Okay, let's dive in. We have so much to cover. Okay, so and I'm doing my presentation standing up today. I have been sitting for 3 days and I am definitely needing a little bit of a boost. So this is going to be great. Today, we're going to be diving into how to drastically improve autism behaviors in 30 days. Also by improving picky and sensory eating with 3 mealtime tweaks. So we are going to dive into everything that I went through and then learn professionally, but in a way that's really quick and understanding so that when you leave this webinar, you have exactly what you need to be successful. All right, so here we are. Stay till the end. We do have an amazing bonus. And so you want to make sure it's a PDF. And so if you are here till the end, you are going to get access to this bonus. It is amazing. And it gives you a little bit of a taste of what we have in the community because these are some of the resources that we actually provide within the community. So So I want to share a little bit about who I am. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Kind of boring, to be honest. And I know that we want to get into the good stuff. But for those of you who don't know me, and this is your first time seeing this face, I really do want to share that what it really comes down to is that I have a lot of experience in many different fields. And it started off that 21 years of frontline healthcare and multiple specialties, specialized certification in diagnostics. What did this teach me about the needs of my child's developing brain and the challenges of overcoming picky eating? And the truth is, it was a big zero. So this is an introduction to myself and my business partner. My business partner is Dr. Junot. Between us, we have 2 decades of experience in lifestyle. She's actually board certified in lifestyle medicine. And so we know how to help you and your family implement and get into the best nutrition supports, but most importantly, how to keep it simple and sustainable in your lives. I always like to tell people that everyone goes through a hero's journey. They've literally written books about this. And this is why it matters so much to me to help our kids. My vision is to see our kids to independence, especially the ones outside of my own, because I see my son in every child that is nonverbal or in every child that is struggling to overcome picky eating, especially if they have autism. And in the beginning of our journey, I was blessed with this beautiful, silly little boy who used to make faces at me and used to make me laugh all the time. And we always know that in a journey, there has to be some sort of adversary or struggle. And our messy middle, as I like to call it, was a huge regression without gains in sight and no knowledge of how to help my child. Like, I felt like a professional back then. I thought I had it all figured out. And I was very, very discouraged that none of the medical textbooks that I could find could help me in helping my child who was becoming more and more picky in his diversity in diet. Like, this is a child who, came into the world eating sweet potato or being breastfed, eating sweet potatoes, all the things, all the vegetables, to literally eating only 3 foods. So I was completely disempowered and helpless on how to help him eat new foods. And I kind of had this idea that his constant regressions, were also interconnected with his pickiness. So no one, like, it got to the point where nobody would even watch him. Nobody would babysit him. I had my in-laws literally tell me, I don't think I can watch Dante because he literally doesn't eat anything. Like, I wouldn't even know what to feed him for more than like one meal. And the truth is, though, is that in every journey like this, there is a really positive outcome. And for us, my son, after I had my huge literal light bulb that kind of blew up after I learned the importance of nutrition and overcoming picky eating, that and for me, mine came from we all have a mentor that shows up in our journey. And for me, it actually is a pretty funny story that I'm not going to get too far into. But Tosca Reno, as I don't know how many of you have had a baby, and then that's when you start to think, okay, well, I'd love to have my pre-baby body. How do I do that without, starving myself and being unhealthy? And now the world is like so open to this. But back then, 10 years ago, I was very limited to the books that I could read. And I came into the world of, I don't know if you all know her, but her name is Tosca Reno, and she was a bodybuilder. And she was the one who introduced me to how diabetes and different diseases could be interconnected with nutrition. And that just kind of opened the floodgates for me to learn about autism and picky eating and nutrition. So I'm going to be fully transparent. I think it's really, really important for families to know that us that are leading the front in this, both professionally, also generally have a very powerful story. And not only was my child a picky eater, my husband and myself were as well. So this is what I grew up on. I decided to add these pictures throughout our presentations. Was I lived off of Zoodles, Pop-Tarts, Corn Pops. I did not eat vegetables at all unless you called it tomato sauce or tomato sauce and pizza. And I thought that that was just fine. I was like, I have all my four food groups. And this is what my son ate. And he ate grilled cheese, chicken fingers, and French fries. This is literally all he ate for from the ages of 2.5, probably until about 3.5, 4 years old. A year and a half of a lot of times where we would be building this wonderful thing in our guts called the microbiome. He actually gave it foods that were really harming it. And a lot of the families will say, well, you ate all these things and you were okay. And the truth was that I wasn't okay. I was a very deregulated child. And then even that going into my teenage years, this led to really, really harmful relationships in the sense of I would have blowouts with my father. He ate very similarly to how I ate. And so we can imagine that two people who are very deregulated because of the foods that they're eating does not work out. And in my young adult life, I made some of the worst choices, not just in my health, but many of these things led to addictive behaviors and so many intrusive thoughts. And when I became pregnant, the truth is the body that housed that beautiful little boy was not only high in toxicity, which is now all the rage in our world to learn about, but also very nutritionally depleted. Okay, so don't worry. This slide is just to prove a point and not to educate you in a lot of different processes within the brain. But just note that the most important part of this image, which I will transparently say thank you to Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, who I'm going to give full credit to creating this image and giving me permission to share it with obviously mentioning her, is that all of these really beautiful little red boxes, they hold nutrients. And these are all these lines are processes that our brain needs to function in just our day-to-day. And so when I learned that basic nutrition was literally the thing that made not just our child, but our brains function, it was like literally this was me. This little light bulb came across and I was just blown away that we have to actually put into it, like the whole saying, we are what we eat is so much more than a saying. It's actually like beyond truth. And then this is the last funky slide I'm going to show you like this, but this is our dopamine pathway, which just means this is our belief, achieve, and motivation success pathway where it keeps us on track of keeping attention. And so look at the nutrients that are needed for just this one action to happen. And it is absolutely a large amount. So let's dive in now that you know the importance of nutrients and why we want to have these in our bodies. We now know the importance of overcoming picky and sensory eating. And my community manager actually came up with an image that was similar to this, and I totally agree. It's such a great way to describe it because she also has a picky eater and obviously is working through the process very well and efficiently. She actually trains in the program as well. But she was like, I didn't realize that my child's potty training issues, my child's hyperactivity issues, when a parent is talking to me about aggression or behaviors, or they're talking about constipation, or they're talking a lot about lack of focus, they never put together that there's a connection between picky eating and all of these behaviors. So by addressing one, yes, mountain, we get to overcome all of these challenges. And so I think that it's such a beautiful image to just kind of put it all, that many of the behaviors that we think are separate are actually together. So you are in the right place if this is your daily reality, that you are having mealtime battles. You're worried about your child not getting what they need to develop and grow. You're definitely in the right place. If you feel like you kind of lack support and you don't have that foundation of people, basically that village that they say takes to help raise a child, you're also in the right place if you want your child to try new foods happily. You're also in the right place if you want to reclaim lost milestones and help your child build and grow a brilliant brain. And you are also in the right place if you want your child to have a healthy relationship with food in the future, not just in the future, but now and into the future, so that they can continue to impact generations to come, including our grandchildren. And I want to share that picky eating is more than why is picky eating more than just a phase? Yes, many people will talk about it, that there are normal ebbs and flows in the picky eating childhood developmental milestones, but that's actually not necessarily always true. And so I want to take a minute to just dive into this portion of it and the importance of how to get from refusal to acceptance. It actually should be happening without the battle, and that it isn't necessarily it's actually very possible for us all to achieve getting from refusal to acceptance without as much resistance as we're used to. I always love this image because I don't know about you, but I love paint nights. We used to do lots of wine and paint nights. I've even led a few actually. And in paint night, you go there, right? And you're painting your picture and you get this step-by-step process. And no matter the fact that each person has an individualized painting that is unique to them with minor variances and different styles, it still has the consensus of being the same image. And so unfortunately, picky eating specialists in our world today do not have the same step-by-step framework. And so what we end up is like basically a step one, step two, and then expecting a successful image that looks the same across the board. And that is not what it looks like at all, right? If we're missing all these steps, we know that all of our images are going to be very different and very potentially unsuccessful. So I want to share that we know that children on the spectrum or with ADHD are a little different than neurotypical children, in the sense that why is it that the traditional models don't work for autism and ADHD when we come across a picky eater, especially with these words? They'll eat when they're hungry, starve them out. We know this is factually incorrect because our children on the spectrum have different hormones that are not triggering when they're hungry. They're called leptin and ghrelin, and they're not working efficiently. So they don't get the same hunger cues that we do as adults, or even as neurotypical children would. And so starving them out is not going to be successful. They'll just continue to not eat. And this is also usually a microbiome deficiency, which is the gut bugs. We're not going to get into too much of that today. We have other trainings for that. But another reason why these methods that our feeding therapists are currently encouraging are not necessarily working is that if we're not being consistent enough, we're not offering it. It's going to take 8 times for your child to eat a food. And then you're like at time number 15 and 20, and you're like, okay, well, I've given the grape with the cracker he likes 20 times and it's still not happening. You're not alone. There is a reason why this is not working. It's not because you're not being consistent enough. So take that it is not your fault. You are among a really good group in this call to know that this is, again, not your fault. And then lastly, the traditional models, which our newest model that we have come in is actually quite successful for some children, which is called the use of food chaining, but don't blend the foods. That's just going to create a lot of deregulation, and we don't change the recipe. That is a big thing, right? So we see that all over the internet. We're going to dive into all of the reasons why some of these things are a little bit far-fetched, and why they actually don't work. Okay, so what is actually the real reason that these methods don't work? It's actually because our children have experienced large amounts of ultra processed foods and making our old methods that used to help children that were neurotypical overcome picky eating. And even many of our neurotypical children, just so you know, are not overcoming picky eating currently. This is going to lead for a very large like growth of, and actually we're already seeing it. There are studies that show that this is the first time in history that our brains are actually shrinking again. And this is not in the norm. Our brains have always grown. And so knowing that we have spent, or not we, but certain food companies that were often purchased by tobacco companies, have spent billions of dollars in a lab as an experiment to find the perfect textures, flavors, and things that basically light up our brains like a Christmas tree in survival happiness, because that's what our brains like. Back in the day of the famine, we used to love to eat really fatty foods that would mean we would get to live another day. So unfortunately, we hold that in our epigenetic evolution. And so what ends up happening is by tapping into this survival instinct, our children have been exposed to things that are highly addictive and that make I don't want to say normal food, but highly nutritious food taste more bitter and tastes not as good. So what do we do in those cases? Well, the truth is that the processed food industry, to me, I like to say it's game over. As they get smarter, we get smarter. We may be a little behind, but we do catch up very, very quickly. And so we get smarter at stopping the process as well. And so this is one of the major reasons that our current picky eating solutions are no longer as effective. Why did they work before? Well, before the food was different. Why don't they work now? Well, again, because the food is different and our grocery stores are also different, and we have hacked into our habit systems. And so we have to reverse engineer a lot of these things, which is why we take a very unique approach in the Bring the Fun Back to Mealtime program. And what you're going to learn today, actually. So what is food chaining? This is a new food method that they now have like explosion of books, entire accounts, social media accounts. Literally, this is all they do all day is like show you images of food chaining, which again, super happy that these things are coming. But but why doesn't it work for everyone, right? And this is where we come in. Again, working off of the traditional models wasn't necessarily working. It's not that that model is incorrect if you have a child who's never had these exposures. So this is a little bit about why this approach is a little different. Number one, picky eating, when we come from a feeding therapy perspective, oftentimes the focus is on the psychological approach, which means the fear-based, like the internal, which is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that part, it's actually part of the process that we do want to implement. But when the entire focus is on just repetition around adding foods to what is familiar to bridge the gap of like safety, there's missing a huge, huge link. And I've presented in front of neurodevelopmental teams, feeding therapy teams, and hospitals on why this alone is not going to work. And it is because it is also a physical problem. And it is a physical problem that's basically rolling into itself or creating a cycle. For example, nutritional deficiencies, there's quite a few of them that actually impact the way the food tastes for your kids. And because our kids have much larger taste buds, they already have more taste happening there. So bitter food tastes more bitter, sour food tastes more sour, sweet food tastes more sweet. As we get older, we actually lose some of that. And so we tend to lean more and more towards more flavorful food as we get older. But for our children, that's the opposite. And so once we make the link that it is also a physical nutritional deficiency issue, and we start to support those nutritional deficiencies, can you guess what happens? Well, if food tastes less bitter and more appealing, then we have this ability to do what we call flavor profiling, which is get our children to adjust their taste buds accordingly. And many of you may not realize this because this is really, well, it's just newly being studied, I guess, is that our taste buds actually change within a week. So when we are someone who salts, I don't know about you guys, I used to salt my food so much. And like I would literally like put the saltiest ketchup that was also full of high fructose corn syrup on my McDonald's fries back in the day. And then I would add like a packet of salt on it. And that became my new normal. And I mean, that was a one-way ticket to high blood pressure, but changing that was hard. because at first I thought that I would have to taste bland food forever. But do you know what? Within a week period, our taste buds actually change. And so all we have to do is work with these small incremental changes. So now that we know that it is potentially not just a psychological issue and we have something that we don't want to ignore, which is the physical issue, we now have to look at why was in the past, like what was the difference, regardless of, I always like to ask this, regardless of if, let's just say we are better at diagnosing autism, and I'm not in that debate today at all, but even in the past, our kids did not eat the way that they eat now, and they were much more regulated. What was the difference? And so we always have to ask ourselves some very quality questions, which is, to me, if processed food didn't exist, right? Do we believe that we would have picky eaters? If our child had never had processed food, whether it was us that gave it to them, I mean, I'm fully transparent, right? Like I literally ate Zoodles. Obviously, my kids were going to not necessarily grow up at the beginning on foods that were extremely healthy, other than the purees I could buy at the grocery store. And so by asking ourselves in the past, when this was very successful, like kids were always eating really well, what were the differences? And one of the major differences, if we look at our mammals in the wild, is that we have started to believe that eating is a survival instinct when it's and not a taught behavior. But the truth is that it is a taught behavior. Animals in the wild literally train their children by bringing food to them so they know what to eat. And it's the same for like hunting. Everything is modeled. And so we do definitely need to take that into account, is that success has left clues in the past. And so we need to go back and then replicate the success that we used to have. Okay, so let's dive into it, because we have a lot to cover today. Okay, so welcome to the Bringing the Fun Back to Mealtime. This is a unique framework to get your kids to eating brain development foods, but also foods that are going to be intentionally brought in that are going to make your or help your children be less picky. Everything is done with intention and strategy. Oh, okay. Whoop. Okay, so tweak number one is all about using an approach and a framework that works. And it's really important to understand that the first thought that most people have coming into this is that my kids just aren't eating these foods. And yeah, maybe you're right. They eat a ton of processed foods. How am I ever going to get them to stop? And it's important for me to share what this looks like, because I think you will all see this is me. Let's just say this was me, and obviously this is not me, this is an image, but I used to make these elaborate meals. And if this is you, you can easily put this in the chat, like with a little hand raise. Like I used, like when we were going through our picky eating journey with my son, who only ate those three foods, right? Chicken nuggets, McDonald's, and French fries. How I would literally build these extravagant meals. I would pour my heart and soul into it. And then this would be him. And it was absolutely heartbroken. I'd be like, okay, so why am I doing this? And I worked healthcare, I worked shift work, I was exhausted. So why would I put so much effort into something that basically my child was turning their nose up at? Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie, for letting me know you could hear me. Oh, and thanks, Jen. Okay, and then what was really discouraging was that I would constantly quit. I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't quit if literally this was the face you got every single time? And some of us are even suffering more with having our child like literally feeding the dog, throwing their food off. But with the right framework, I'll show you how this is actually possible for anyone. I promise. If I can do it in the situation that I was in, it was really all just a one mindset shift and tweak. Anyone can do it. So there are actually three parts to our framework, and the resistor, the adventurer, and the negotiator. And we're going to break them down a little bit. The first thing is, this is like the missing link. Remember I talked about the literal food chaining event where it looks beautiful on an image, and then you like literally give your child the chicken nugget, and then you give them the chicken strip, and they're like, no way, Jose, or you cut it up and they're like, no way. So my son actually was the resistor, and I will share that because could you imagine trying to give your child, I was trying to give my son all these different things, or like I was introducing yogurt, I was introducing vegetables, and like literally the only thing that got eaten was the nuggets. And preferably from McDonald's. And unfortunately, I live in a small town and McDonald's is very accessible. So we had McDonald's often. Sometimes grandpa, full transparency, brought my son to McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because he was so picky. And all I had to work with, could you ever imagine at the beginning, was his juice. He liked apple juice. And that was the only thing that, as I was trying to use these other techniques, because I had no training back then, please understand that, was that I had none of these things that I do now, which now it's like way more successful. But I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? And so what I decided was, okay, I can work with juice. I have a juicer. I had started my journey. Remember, I mentioned it ahead of time. My mentor was Tosca Reno, which is kind of funny not to think about it. And so I was juicing. I was eating whole foods. I was cooking 3 different dinners for everybody. My husband also was a picky eater, so he was actually the last one to overcome picky eating, by the way. If you have an adult picky eater, they do change over time. But for myself, I was like, okay, what can I do with this? What can I do with this one juice? And at this point, I was extremely committed. And I want to share that I had made the commitment that I knew that this was important. And so no matter what, my thought that I chose to have, because I had to choose it, and that's what we all do, is that I wasn't going to give up. So I looked at his juice and I knew I had a juicer, and I started to try to help him juice with like fresh pressed juice. And that was a complete flop, right? Failure, like literally someone who is successful at the beginning of a journey like this that has no mentor or framework is literally a person who has sat on a million failures and just never gave up. And I was bullheaded and I was not going to give up on this one. And so what I very quickly learned was that if I faded things in, and that's what we coin in the program, is if we fade things in at a 10% increment, it allows for the adjustment period for a 1-week period, for example, for our taste buds to adjust. So I looked at his juice and I added about 10% of a fresh pressed juice in. He didn't even notice. Okay, I kept that like that for a bit. I added 10% more about a week or 2 later. So now we're at 20%. Didn't notice. Okay, perfect. So I kept going. And then his juice became a completely over time, and over about, I'd say about a 2 to 3 week period, it eventually became an entire fresh pressed juice. Now I had a vehicle to offer new nutrient dense foods. So I started with the foods that were less flavorful, spinach, cucumber, things like that, zucchini. And these all made a difference. My son all of a sudden started to be more curious about foods. Then I started to change the look of food. And so what it ended up looking at was a little bit more like this popsicle picture that you're seeing. And this is another vehicle. Like we have like what we call like the familiar foods as vehicles, and then we use fading techniques to allow for taste buds to adjust. As our children, like I said, become nutritionally sound or their nutritional gaps are filled and food is less bitter, then why wouldn't they be more open and feeling safer? Not only does it allow them to have enjoyment in the flavor, but it also supports them in not having so much anxiousness around food, because also anxiety is often a nutritional deficiency as well, and a microbiome deficiency. So we're tackling 2 things with just one action. And so as you can tell in this image, we have multiple food fades happening. This child, potentially you see only spaghetti that was one color, which was basically probably white with butter or just, pasta by itself. Fading it in, this child is about at a 50% fade in at this point. So that's not where they would have started. But you may be thinking, okay, well, that's great for you. How does this work for me? And the truth is these are all the places that we have successfully been able to fade and change food for our kids to have a more nutritionally like filling the gaps experience. And with that brings us into the second adventure stage, because once you get through rigidity and you start to change things more intentionally, we can build into the adventure and the psychological portion of what we want to do with our kids. Imagine this is where a lot of feeding therapies are starting. And so they're missing a huge part of the painting, right? And a huge part of the instructions. So basically feeding is like food chaining at a microscopic level, giving scientific knowledge and backing to the fact that our taste buds change in a week. So hashtag goals, right? We want our child to eat this. Every person that is here would love to see their child eat a pile of vegetables like this without any question. So we need to get the kids to enjoy these foods so much, right? That when they move out and they're happy, right? They move out. Yes, that's a thought. I want you to have that dream. Like if your child is nonverbal right now and really severe, I want you to have the thought that someday, yes, they can have independence and they can live the life of their dreams and be fully functional in society and providing the world with their gifts. And I think that it's important for them to, when they leave the home, this is all about what the adventurer creates, is a sustainable support system for them to continue this for generations. Like my son, for example, doesn't love avocado, right? But he loves it in a smoothie, knows how to make the smoothie, he adds avocado. Know that this is something that we do need to teach and model for our children. And this is all about building trust with food and operating with like free will and choice, AKA consistency and multiple options. And so what we look at is now understanding food fade. So this is a food fade technique, and this is going into where we would chain food in. So for example, a food fade in like what we talked about in the resistor for a child could look like they enjoy oatmeal. You can add 10% of quinoa, and then you can increase it so that they have more nutrients, such as now you're looking at least a high quality protein. And then you can start to really look at the different aspects of what could be graded in there. Cauliflower rice is great. And then even using multiple, and there's like a pile of fruits here because we all know that fruits are very easy, but you start mashing them. And then once you faded them in, you can start to actually put them on the plate beside and to create more of a engaged presence and engaged system. And this is to me one of the most important things that are missing in many of our systems, is that there is this thought that it's going to take too long. Like my child is too old, it's going to take too long. We can food train adults, so please don't think that. I was a picky eater. I did not eat a bean until I was 40. I used to be that little girl who had to sit at the table and would fall asleep at the table because I hated the texture of beans and was sensory to them. Should have been a good eye opener that something was going on, but back then they didn't worry about those things, especially with the diet that I had, right? So what is sensory eating, and what would a sensory eating profile analysis do for you? So I think that it's important to understand that we can skip the guesswork. And once we start to actually ask ourselves really good questions of what's our lowest hanging fruit for our kids. I did this for my child, and I'll give an example, is that my son gagged and was a very, very sensory eater, because I get that question a lot. Well, picky eating is not the same as sensory eating because of autism. No, your child with autism is a sensory eater because they're nutritionally deficient, because that is the cause of sensory processing disorder, not their autism. And I know this because I had to go through a journey with one of the most sensory eaters there are. And my son used to gag on anything that was mashed potato consistency, and to the point where sometimes he would throw up. So obviously, this is not what we call a low-hanging fruit. This is like not the texture we would start with. And so what we did was I started to work with knowing, and I did this very strategically and from a space of a lot of questioning. And I started working with the textures that he enjoyed. And so, for example, I remember he had tried a carrot. So I knew that crunchy things were a little more accepted in the vegetable area. And because he had tasted these flavors before in a juice, he was more open to trying something like a celery or something that would be crunchy. And so that's what we worked when we were working on vegetables, is that my son accepted raw vegetables prior to any other type of cooked mashy consistency. And we did that with a lot of intention. And so having a sensory profile, like the things that we do in our program, helps families to be like, I can be so much more successful because it's going to happen faster, because I know what the likelihood of acceptance is based on what he already eats. A lot of things that we don't often ask ourselves. And it's an entire, I'll explain this a little bit later, actually. Okay, so the last step is, what is the negotiator? So there is ways to negotiate effectively, and I don't want people to overcomplicate it, because you can see it all over the internet. Don't negotiate dessert with dinner. You'll just have a child who eats dessert all the time. And I do agree with this, but there is a very successful way to negotiate if you have done parts 1 and 2 effectively before you do this part. And it is important to understand fading techniques, and that this is a multi-system approach, but that is very important to follow the framework pattern. And there is a reason, because if you know how to fade something in, you'll know how to fade it out. But let's not overcomplicate it. Okay, going back, each of these builds off of the next. And you're going to be using this over and over throughout the whole process. And you'll never stop using one. If there are any questions about that, feel free to kind of drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. But I always tell people, don't overcomplicate it. Because by the time your child has gotten to the negotiator stage, which is the most effective stage, I actually literally just use this stage to bridge the gap for some more sensory foods. Or for example, like I wanted my son back then to have bone broth. We're more plant-based now, but back then I was really, really adamant that this was going to be a healing food for him. And it was really hard to introduce. He literally gagged and threw up the first time. And so we started to use different negotiation reward systems. And they could be sticker systems, they could be toy systems, they could be, I mean, we have a lot of Legos for a reason. They can be in experience. Like I have some families that do amazing ticket systems. But by the time your child gets to this point, they're much more engaged. And even if they were nonverbal prior, they're usually at a state when they get here that they can negotiate effectively. Now, the real reason that most people get stuck through the process, because that's the other thing, is the feeling number one that they can't do it because they've done it before and they've had all the strategy. And I can completely agree that the reason people get stuck, it's not a strategy deficiency problem, which means we have lots of people who can teach us different things. And my system, like our system here in the Blue Life RX is very effective. But when I see a family specifically get stuck in introduction, there are very specific reasons. And the first thing is that we have created this belief within ourselves, which is that I cannot do it. I can't do it anymore. I've tried so many times. They don't accept it. He won't eat that, so you don't introduce it. And that is very normal. And I'm going to explain this a little bit because the first time I tried this, I was so frustrated that I gave up. Like when someone was like, and it was an occupational therapist, and she was like, oh, he eats just McDonald's. Like, have you tried this? I was like, okay, I'll try it. And of course, guess what? Well, it didn't work. And so I got really, really upset. And it was because of my expectation. And that is the real reason, is that my expectation was much, much out of line as compared to where my child was at. And so I'm going to bring you through what I have coined the 4 E's. In tweak number 2, we'll learn about 2 of them. And then in tweak number 3, you'll learn the last 2. But in this space, it's always the reason why is expectation and also this emotional intelligence. And I just couldn't get why my son was rejecting all these foods that honestly at the beginning, guys, like my favorite food is pizza, and my son rejected pizza. And I couldn't understand how something that tasted so good was not accepted. And so my expectation was really, really high. And it was very specific to what I wanted him to eat, and how I showed up, which I'll talk about in a second, matched that expectation. So I want to start with expectation a little bit, and I want to describe this image slightly, just to share that I want to tell you that anyone can figure this out. But I'm going to give you an example of what expectation versus reality looks like, even in our program at the beginning, especially in the resistor stage. And I think that this is really important to start there because many of you are starting in that space. And the first thing is that expectation is that they're going to eat this. What families don't understand is the reality is that this little dish here that this child likely loves can have all of the things that are in this dish that the child can enjoy. And they could even know it's there. Please don't be misguided in thinking that your child won't accept a food if they know what's in it. And what I mean by that is a macaroni and cheese. Your child might know that they have all those vegetables in it and are just as happy eating it because it feels safe and familiar. And so at first, yes, we want to transition into feeding techniques and all of these other pieces. But when we actually match our reality, the reality of what your child is going to meet you at happily, because this is the point of bringing the fun back, right? We want them to eat this forever and leave the home and be happy, is that we have to start with what they already love. And so, for example, this mac and cheese can literally have broccoli, carrots, sweet potatoes, squash, all kinds of things, beets, all kinds of foods in it that are nutritionally supporting them. Okay. You guys are gonna love this. So I will tell you that I did not look like the family in this picture right here. Um, I love it. Don't they look happy? Like, honestly, I definitely would be trying any of these foods as this if I was this little girl and this was my mom and we were just having a good time, right? There's just so much love and beauty in that picture. And I want to share that that is where how our children thrive, and what they will thrive in is in this peace and joy and ease and non-expectation and emotional intelligence. This mom, her expectation is just she's going to cut vegetables with her daughter. Maybe she is expecting her to eat it. Who knows? Maybe she's not a picky eater. But the point is that your child will be much more likely to try something. I was this train wreck right here. This was how I presented food to my child. And I'll be completely transparent, and don't feel bad if this is you as well, is that PTSD is a real thing. And rejection is something that humans, even though we are told not to take it personally, we do. And I'm going to share this really wise quote that someone told me that I thought of today actually and added to this presentation, was that the amount of no's you've gotten will be the amount of the success you'll also have. It's about consistency. And the real flex is that becoming the bull without letting it get to you is going to be the most important and thing that's going to move you forward. And it might take a village of moms behind you to support you to do this. I'm not going to lie that sometimes it's really great when you've had like 10 food introductions that may have not gotten your way, to have a group of women who have been through that, or a group of moms that have been through that and are like, don't worry, it's still going to happen. And this is what I did. And this is what I did. And that's why being in very, very powerful rooms of success is a game changer in this space. Okay, so tweak number 3, which is to me the last piece, is that it's about the fun. It's about who you surround yourself with. And in many cases, I get this question a lot, or this statement a lot is, I don't have any support in this. It's always me. I'm the one cooking everything. I'm the one presenting everything. It feels like sometimes everyone is against me, including my close family. And I want to share with you why environment is so important, and in 2 different examples. And especially around the will of the need for support. And I'm going to get off topic completely here, just a little bit for 1 second, just to give you such a good example of this, that it's going to make sense for why this is going to impact your child's food introduction as well, because we can find stories about these success stories all throughout our lives, because how we do one thing is how we do everything. That's another great quote I love. And I repeat it to myself often and have throughout my life. Is I actually grew up on the wrong side of the tracks when I was younger. I don't talk about that a lot. Really vulnerable share in the last webinar, is specifically this one. So much so that, like, if I was to be completely transparent and serious, there was a drug dealer on one side of the street and a drug dealer on the other side of the street. And so growing up, before having a license to drive, meant that I was surrounded by people like this, because we are the average of the 5 people that we surround ourselves with. So could you imagine my life as a teenager, eating really crummy food, and surrounded by all of these different types of people that were not necessarily living their best lives? I'm sure you can imagine that I was not necessarily moving in the right direction. So my first experience, and what this is all getting down to, is my first experience of changing my environment was actually to choose to date someone outside of my circle of friends. And by changing who I was with, everything changed for me. I got better, I ate differently, and I made completely different choices. And I want to bring that back into describing how we create, or who we decide to spend time with, will help us to create success. And so environment wise, there are ways to do this, and we can create that success in a home, even that may feel like people are against you, or even if your in-laws are kind of not on board, without divorces or fights, I promise. And how we do that is we choose to surround ourselves with, outside of the home or in different times throughout the week, with people and in rooms that are able to teach you how to use persuasion and influence effectively, and especially with people who have had success and experience with influence and persuasion in those spaces. That is how we create an environment that is successful. Okay, so now, now let's get back on topic and talk about how this environment change, or what that would look like for a child, bringing my story that I just shared into more of the story that's going to help you right now effectively. And so what changing environment for our kids looks like is, of course, yes, if they're surrounded by picky eaters, they're likely going to be a picky eater. Don't get me wrong. That's like just the fact. But it can mean a lot of things. It could mean removing distractions. It can mean choosing to make sure that the area is more minimalistic. It can mean changing the environment completely. If you and your child are going into your kitchen and you both have PTSD from food introductions, maybe that's not where we try the next food introduction. Maybe we do it in an area that's fun. Maybe we do it outside. Just a couple of examples of understanding both internal environment and external environment. And what would environment be without encouragement? I'm going to share one quick thing on this because we all need encouragement throughout our lives. Our biggest successes are generally because someone either encouraged us or didn't give up on us and allowed us to be in the bigness of our dreams. And so I made a big decision, for example, 3 years ago, to hold on to my values and autonomy. And it actually found me leaving healthcare for good after 2 decades. Could you imagine? So the moral of that story, to bridge it into this story, is that I wouldn't even be standing in front of you if my business partner, who is amazing, didn't believe in me and invest into creating this community that has a mission to help the hurting kids of our world thrive. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. And she encouraged me, though, in not just words, but in the actions that she did, both financially, but also emotionally, and not just with words, right? And she actually invested in for me to have coaching programs such as the ones that I actually lead now. So it's really fun. But this is the example to show you that we have encouragement all our lives, and that encouragement without expectation is a skill that we can learn and bring to our children to help them overcome picky eating. And it can be done in a way that is fun. I kind of want to end that whole talk, or like this part of the presentation, with, we learn 400 times faster in fun than in repetition. And so our focus in a lot of our autism world, like ABA and treatment and therapy, is focused heavily on repetition. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We do learn through repetition. It accesses a different part of the brain. But when it comes to picky eating, we have a very starving family. We have very starving families. So we want to really move them quickly into eating healthy foods. And so if we can learn 400 times faster in fun, then encouragement in a fun environment is going to be a game changer for you. And I can tell you by this image, I'm sure you could tell by this image, nobody is force feeding a child. It's all about encouraging through different avenues, whether it be words, whether it be modeling, whether it be investing. It's in like funny hats or different cutlery. Who knows what that looks like? But we definitely break it down into the program. So does it work? So I want to talk, and I'm not going to get too technical. So this mom brought the fun back. She was successful not just in getting her son to eat diversity, but in the process of fun and food. And in the process of like the fun and the food, she changed his gut health in under 3 months. He started in the 52 percentile and ended up in the 87th percentile in under 3 months. She hadn't done anything else other than really have a huge focus on encouragement, and emotional intelligence and fun. Those were like her main. She likes to coin, one day she gave a testimonial. It was actually pretty magical. And she said, this week I counted smiles instead of words. And this actually, for her, in her situation, led to more words, from nonverbal head banging, and to this beautiful, beautiful outcome. Okay. Does it work? Well, this family here, which I love to share, it's a little bit more personal, but they actually have 2 boys. Both were a little bit more in the severe ADHD, and both presented very differently. And you may find yourself in some of these stories and feel a little bit very connected to these families, because one of their children was more aggressive and very, very frustrated easily, whereas the other was very hyperactive and complete opposite ends of the spectrums. But again, same home, totally different diets. And in just 2 months, they were noticing their children were accepting more foods and their behaviors were radically changing. And that is what we like to see. For this one, we went from crying to happiness right from the beginning, which is why these connections of like understanding that our foods that we eat help to produce the happiness hormones like serotonin. These are actually things that we can influence just with what we put in our mouths and our stomachs. And then this family here, after many, many, many introductions of trying to swap from one specific type of chicken nugget to another, finally was successful, which was really exciting. Two testimonials here in the same image. One is from a mom that I showed you the gut health at the beginning. This was finally being able to eat things that they had never not been able to eat as a family that she really enjoyed. Completely life-changing. Imagine going back to meals that you enjoyed that were actually just like souped up with some vegetables in it. And that's what kind of where they went, which made them super happy. And then the other one was from a completely nonverbal start to leaving her therapist's office saying time to go and waving goodbye. So I always say upgrading from foods to words. Okay, and in the Bring the Fun Back to Mealtime program, this is when consistency pays off, an environment and consistency and encouragement, plus a very big foundation of emotional intelligence. This mom specifically knows that she has a little bit of anxiety around feeding her daughter specifically. And so a win like this was absolutely life-changing to her. And then we have our picky eating, just going through the picky eating stage. This is actually a fellow nutrition practitioner who was really, really stuck and really, really anxious because she loved food, kind of in the same space I was at the beginning. And then went from seeing her son, whom she was taking a complete biomedical approach with, go from very, very nonverbal, very, very closed off in his world to now playing hide and seek with his brother very, very quickly. Obviously still having lots of work to do, but right from the beginning of the program, just massive changes in the space. And this one here has a little bit of a special place in my heart. She was one of our winners for one of our scholarships a long, long time ago. And her son, who used to only eat steak and rice and is now sending me images of just eating so much diversity and including so many new different things by bringing her child in the process in the kitchen. And then, of course, this mom, it was from Pakistan. This was a huge stretch for her to join the program, both emotionally, financially, and there was a lot of even barriers to her being able to pay for the program. And she did, and she definitely has no regrets. Her daughter is doing more eye contact, and the last message that I got from her was that she had now begun to be verbal from being a nonverbal state and saying mama. So this is a science-backed approach. I did this research prior to this call, actually, and I just thought, you know what, let's just break it down to some meta-analysis studies. And these are 5 just easily found meta-analysis studies that show the link between autism and the elevated amounts of nutritional deficiencies. And so we know that this works. And it's important for us to know that investing in our children's future, which I don't know if this was you, like when my son was born, I opened an RESP, that's what we have in Canada, and I started saving for his future. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like ahead of the game. I'm doing so good right now because I was in healthcare, it was a possibility for me. Really happy about that. And then I got that diagnosis, or we went into our first pediatrician's appointment. And then as we progressed through these appointments and no speech was coming in speech therapy and occupational therapy, I got to the state where I was like, why am I even doing this? Why am I even saving? And it was a really, really, like absolutely heart-wrenching, like a knife was through my heart thinking that that money would eventually potentially go to an institution because my son was still 6 years old and had no words. And was still a very picky eater. And to put it on a little bit of a lighter note, I had a shift that happened with me when they started talking about iPad communication therapy. And I had this realization that I needed to start investing in him now, and that money for school later would just have to either be, saved up later or worked for later, but right now was the time I needed to invest. And as I started doing more education and spending money in courses, specifically one for advanced child brain development, I realized that we need to shift our thoughts around and focusing all of this intent on investing in their future to investing in their brains now. And why was that? I realized quickly that no one got the new manual or the new education manual to shop at the grocery store. And I was like, oh, yeah, all right. You know what? It's because they didn't actually create one for us. And we didn't need one before, right? You were guaranteed in let's just say the 1970s, 1980s, you were guaranteed to build a great, or at the very least, a very functional brain just by eating what was available in the grocery store. We are now in a time where 90% of our grocery store is actually reversed from what we grew up in. And I was already addicted to corn pops back then and all of these unhealthy things. Imagine now that was 10% of the store and now it's 90% of the store, but nobody got told that, hey, these things that are harming our children's bodies, they're actually really important for us to, we need to learn how to navigate and minimize. I know that many of you are dreaming of this right here, right? But you're probably feeling a little bit like this right now. And I know that you want image one. That's my son actually eating a kale salad at a restaurant and some duck wings. And I'm sure that many of you would love to go to a restaurant and watch your child eat a kale salad. I understand. And you've been fire hosed with information. But I want to share that I could keep going with education and stats and data and stories, but really the real success is through implementation of the processes I just taught you. And if it's all right, I'm actually just asking permission to share with you how myself and my team can help you to be successful in this journey specifically. And I'd like to introduce you to the actual Bring the Fun Back to Mealtime program, which yes, you already know the framework now. I don't need to repeat any of that. But what is included in that program to guarantee family success? So first, I want to share that within our program, we have, yes, oh, why is that so loud? We do, oh, whoops. Imperfect action, I do this. So that we have a comprehensive course material. And it's all about diving deep into these design modules that are short in their lessons, and then also allow for you to have strategy calls in the sense of, I always do one lesson strategy tip. So one of them is the framework and how to implement it. And then the second one is examples of how to implement it, which people tend to thrive more with having real life examples projected to them. And these materials are available to revisit anytime you need a refresher, every time that we kind of rebuild or restart the program, which we do on a cohort basis for every 3 months. And basically the comprehensive course material, which is valued at $999, honestly, just my professional education in learning about the nutrition and neophobia training was over $4,000. And then not even including, which you do get this inclusion of an e-workbook that took months to create. So the value is definitely there, but that wasn't all I wanted. I didn't want to just create a course. And I want to introduce you to the coaches. I want to get rid of the thought I need to DIY this because I DIY'd it. Okay. I wished for something like this. And DIYing it took me 4 years. Like if we really think of it took me anywhere from a year to 2 years, and then everything progressively after 2 years just got better and better. But it took me a long time. It took me years. And we have some families now overcoming this in just a few months. Why? Well, because on my journey to success, I realized that when you have a mentor, just like in the hero's journey, usually in the hero's journey, there's something that happens, like there's like this beautiful start, an adversary, a problem, a mentor that helps you fix the problem really fast, and then some super success, and then you share your vision with the world. Well, imagine my journey went up to the part where I was supposed to have a mentor, and I didn't have one of those except for education and reading, things online and really just trying to DIY this whole experience. It slowed down my progress so much. So now meeting the literal village that's going to blow up your success in this, starting with Dr. Juno, who is a lifestyle board certified in lifestyle medicine and of course family medicine. She is not here to be your doctor though. She is actually here to teach you about those two very important things I talked about: influence, persuasion, mindset. She's also certified in Brennan Bouchard's high performance coaching. She is amazing at coaching people into implementation and how to influence all those people that may be, stopping you from your success. It is amazing to have her on board. There's an entire call dedicated for this. I always like to joke it's the adults call. So we work with kids for strategy, and then adults for part two. And so then there's, of course, myself. You have met me. I am, my story now, all of my past pretty much laid out for you to know. And then I focus on, obviously, the nutrition and strategic pieces of the calls. Sangeeta is, again, compassionate coaching professional, also nutrition professional, and absolutely amazing with anything mindset. She is an amazing health coach and is very sought after. We actually have her in a study in our hospitals for working with patients to help them, bridge that gap into making transitions to better nutrition. And so her and Dr. Juno actually tag team the calls every other week. And then we have our amazing community manager. Her name is Jen. She actually helps to create those sensory profiles. She is absolutely phenomenal. The resources that she has created for picky eating, not just for herself and her children, but for all of the people in our community. Honestly, I always say that Jen alone is worth like $5,000, which is like for each person that comes in, because of how much you actually get to talk to Jen and work with her. And she will be there to cry with you on your hardest day, and she's going to celebrate you the hardest on your best day. So with this team, what does that look like? What do they do for you? And it actually includes 12 months of coaching and support. And from what I hear, it is one of the highest support programs out there currently. It's not a one and done, right? You'll have access to this dedicated support for an entire 12 months, ensuring that no matter where you start, you're never alone. That's the last thing we want. Remember, we are the average of the 5 people we hang out with. You want to be part of these 5 people, trust me. And so the challenges again, and celebrating your victories. And so what does that look like? Well, it actually looks like 6 monthly coaching calls. So you actually get to talk to these people at multiple times. These are group coaching calls. We do 2 mindset calls a month, and they follow strategy and mindset. We do that very, very intentionally to make sure you're successful. So it's usually either a kickoff mindset call, and then we work on a strategy, and then we actually break down the mindset that's needed to sometimes implement the strategy or the roadblocks. So we do this consistently. This is one of the most successful approaches I have seen in this space. And it allows you to gain clear, actionable steps to apply our unique framework to your specific life. We do 1 Fill Your Cup Sunday call. This is all about implementing. If you're not a planner, if you are overwhelmed, you got to come to this call. We literally break it down for you. We teach you evaluation processes, how to pick your next action without it being hard. I always tell people 52 actions, think about it, 52 weeks. If you actually just tried to bring in 1 action a week, you would be 52 times ahead of someone who has done nothing. And then of course, our monthly mingles, where imagine being in that room. Remember I said, if you kind of need that whole like village behind your child, or behind the mom, especially, this is where the monthly mingles, you get to connect with other moms who are going to share all the tricks that are supportive and that they've seen work, and to help you break through your own roadblocks in like a meet setting. Okay, so monthly coaching calls and support value, very, very, it's actually valued at much more than this, but $16,000 per year. We've got some fun bonuses at the end about that, but just stick around to find out. And then of course we have our exclusive toolkits and resources. So you get access to in our community, a wealth of resources that are really, really simple to find, that cover everything from meal planning to sensory friendly toolkits, to making your journey smoother, to also recipes are added weekly, how to keep your kids at the table, how to speak to your kids about food in a positive way. And then of course, let's just say you missed the coaching call yesterday, and then you absolutely had something happen that you want support in. We have this ability for community messaging support. Have a question between calls, you can reach out to our community manager. You can reach out to some of our coaches, and then you actually get to this very, very personalized conversation. So it's pretty amazing. So our exclusive community and resources, honestly, the website alone costs us $3,000. So you are getting way more than a $3,000 value, but we are going to put it at $3,000 just because that's easier. And then a total value of over $19,997, but there is more. We never stop. We want to give you more. One of the members had once asked me, like, I feel like I really needed a little bit more of like a targeted approach when I came in. And so I always love feedback that helps me to create more for families that are going to be more successful and targeted. And for some of us joining this program, there is a little bit more of an advanced thought. So everyone gets access to this, but it depends on where you are in your journey. But imagine coming in, being able to do a small quiz assessment based on behaviors and figuring out if your child needs more of a supporting intentional food introduction for detox pathways, focusing on, or maybe it's not that, maybe they need more proliferation of gut support, or maybe they need more brain development supports based on sensory needs and picky eating. So this was created to help you get started with specific foods to try, matching your sensory profile and knowing which ones to add first. Game changer. And so that quiz assessment based protocol took me quite some time to make. I'm not going to lie. We had to evaluate a lot of our members. I had to go through a lot of what I was seeing in our coaching calls, lots of replays, lots of watching. And then kind of from that pulling where I saw the best outcomes. And that is valued at $499 for a total value of $20,496. And truthfully, if all this did was help your child to eat more diverse foods, would it be worth it? I'm sure that your struggles, especially if you're in the mealtime mayhem zone like I would have paid a lot for that. And if all this did was help your child enjoy food with you and build those relationships and connections with your family, would it be worth it? And if all this did was allow your child to have better brain function and development, would it be worth it? And if all this did was allow your child to self-regulate, communicate more effectively, would it be worth it? I know it would have been worth it for me. Now, I had two choices when creating this, and actually at first I did the first choice, and I did notice that families were not necessarily as successful, and it did bother me a lot. I really like to see our kids get the best success for the time I spend with them. And so I decided to choose the second option, which was create a robust coaching program that, wasn't just course based. We know that actually only 22% of people finish courses. And so imagine knowing that when they have the things that make them successful, three things: accountability, strategy, and support, that we could guarantee that success. That's what I wanted for our families. And so I created this robust coaching program. And no, you're not actually going to pay that much. It's actually for today. You can actually get it for $1,797. And with this comprehensive course, and program, I should say, you get the bringing the fun back to mealtime. It delivers far more than just a course. It's going to make you successful. It's a roadmap to making mealtime joyful, bringing the fun back, and empowering you with strategies and support. Plus, you get to hang out with us, which is pretty fun. And which is what I like the most. So just a reminder of everything you get your comprehensive course materials valued at much higher than what it is there, $997, your 12-month of coaching. That alone, for that many coaching calls per month, I have heard is unheard of. Exclusive community and resources, plus your roadmap. And you may think, okay, but what if I get one roadmap and I want to do them all? You're still going to do them all. We still work on opening up the detox pathways, mitochondrial function, all that stuff, all that fancy stuff you may be too new to even know about that's on your radar. You're going to learn about it and you're going to love it. But we actually go through all the processes with every family. It's just nice to have a targeted approach at the beginning. And so we have bonuses. So I want to thank you for staying on this call. We actually have, for the first one, we have a bonus that is a prepay bonus. So if you choose to pay in full, we're actually knocking 25% off the price. So it's actually $13.47. And this is, I know, much less than even what everyone out there is currently charging. So yay for you guys that are here today. And it's also the last call, guys. This is our last live call before we finish. Our enrollment period is finishing on December 31st. And I want to share something, the biggest bonus of this all. Imagine getting access to 5 coaching calls for life. And I want to share that this lifetime access is mind-blowing. Imagine $16,000 worth of coaching that you get every single year for free. And I want to share that these coaching calls are not just for kids. I know that, yes, for kids, it's amazing and it is going to change your child. But as you go through this and you start to show up to these calls, especially the mindset calls with Sangeeta and Dr. Juno, you start to see how well We can work with ourselves and our inner workings in our mindset space. They're completely game changers, and you get access to that for life. And also the picky eating calls are also accessible for life. I have lots of families come in that are just having babies and they're like, will this work for my other child if I need it? Yes, it is a family program. So lifetime access is huge, and 25% off if you're doing the prepay. Now you have two choices. First, we could do nothing and not take this leap of faith that is 100% risk-free, and I will share about that in a sec. Second, you can put through this investment today compared to all the value you'll get in return and give it a shot. Now, I do want to ask you some really quality questions that I have been asked before that really changed how I thought about my current situation that I wanted to change. Because if you're here, you're looking for change, but change is scary. So, but I want to share something. I want to ask you, what is the cost of you not doing this? What's it going to be? And I'm going to share transparently that the average cost of severe autism over a lifetime for both parents and for government support is over $3 million. And so lastly, the most, to me, important question that has changed my life over and over again when I went into coaching programs was, in 6 months from now, if everything stays the same and nothing changed at all, how would that feel? Now, what if it was guaranteed? We are so confident that picky eating can help children on the spectrum. Like, it's literally the logical approach. I showed you the data. And we now know with epigenetic supports that a lifestyle approach for all conditions is foundational. So if you have a child that's struggling with potty training, behavior, constipation, focus, hyperactivity, we're actually here to say that we are guaranteeing the ATEC score. If you don't know what that is, it is from the Autism Research Institute. It gives you a score based on symptomatic assessment. It's very long, but it's very worth it. And we're actually using that as a marker, a data point, which a lot of programs don't do. They don't use data. We love to use data in our program to guarantee that it actually gets a lower score. And so the purchase is actually free, or it's actually guaranteed. So do we have payment plans is the next question I always get. And the answer is yes. Of course we do. We have two. So if you choose the 6-month payment plan, it's $299. And the link, I believe, is already in the chat. If by chance you choose the $299 payment plan, it's still 10% off. It's still kind of nice. And then our 12-month payment plan is just the payment plan. There's no added extra. It's just the payment in full. It's $150 US. And again, very important for everyone to understand, we are closing enrollment, and this is the last time that this will ever be available for lifetime access. We are never offering this again. We are doing it because we are shifting to a cohort style, and we know, and I know how much it allows us to shift and mold our program even to better outcomes. So this is also closing soon. Again, end of Christmas, next week we're out of office. So no time like the present. Okay, so the link is in the chat. You have your options. Again, reminder of all the wonderful things you get: comprehensive course material, your 12-month lifetime access to coaching and supports, exclusive community and resources. Again, $17.97, prepay bonus, 25% off, $13.47. It's amazing. And then, of course, your bonus to have lifetime access. I am so grateful you stayed. After this call, you will actually, because you're all in my community, the free part of the community, you should be getting a message with our resource on how to talk to your kids about food. There is a very positive way to do this. This is not the same program as my 5,000. No, this is not that same program. This program is included in the BLA program. These are the only two programs we have. So I think that it's really, that was a great question. So what ended up happening with, we're actually going into Q&A, so let's dive in. So what ended up happening was we had such a big success with the Bring the Fun Back to Mealtime program that is housed in the BLA program. It used to not be available for separation. And I saw that there was such a big need and so many requests for families who really felt like they couldn't. So there's a BLA in this, not to be confused. The BLA will include this program. And again, that is also changing pricing in the new year. But this one here is also more only open for enrollment 4 times a year. And this is just to overcome and focus on picky eating, brain development nutrients, opening of the detox pathways, which actually are precursors to doing the BLA successfully. which is why it's included in the other program, and which is why that those who actually choose to start with this program, they get $1,000 discounted from the other program as well. So it's not like you're paying extra for the program should you want to upgrade. You're really just kind of stepping stone it for people who do need to have something that is a little bit more affordable. So you don't ever really lose, it just all works together. And then I can tell that there's a lot of questions, so thank you, and feel free to ask more questions. I hope that answered that question. If it didn't, then let me know. So first question that I have is, how long does it typically take to see improvements with picky eating and sensory issues in this program? This is a great question, and it's also a question I get a lot, and I have to answer it a little bit without giving a direct answer, but I will answer it. I think that'll make sense after. So the important thing to understand is that when you are bringing in something like this, it's really dependent on implementation and what your child is accepting and how it's implementing and if a parent is working. Like, we're gonna have different outcomes if someone is working full-time shift work like I used to versus someone who is able to be a stay-at-home mom and is in their, again, like super great role and has way more access to be able to do this. And so the thing is that it's going to be dependent on that. Now, for some families, we have had families see changes the next day. That is like obviously unusual, but I can say a handful of families have come in. Constipation was literally changed within a week. Child was saying new words within a week. Some in 3 months, they're saying more than 100 words. Average to see results is 6 weeks to three months to start to see the changes and then progressively move forward, just continuing on the process. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so my next question is, my child has extreme food aversions, so like ARFID. Will the program work for kids who refuse even to touch certain foods? Yeah, so sensory issues all stem from sensory processing disorder. We have multiple ways to support both ARFID kids. It does look different. Usually children who have that severe avoidance restrictive are more verbal. And so it's a bit of a different process, but we definitely can support families, which is why for right now, if that is your child, you want to be in this program with lifetime access, your journey will potentially be a little bit longer if you have like an actual food disorder, but it is still completely possible. And we do see families get results who come to the calls especially. How does this program fit into a busy schedule? Are the strategies easy to implement daily? So the answer is yes, because number one, we don't have to implement strategies every single day, although it is in the consistency of the actions that we do daily that we do see the biggest changes. But the truth is that I went through this entire process fully transparently with no knowledge, healthcare worker, on call all the time with 2 businesses on the side, and we were able to be successful with no guidance. So I like to tell people that what I have brought into this world is very achievable with the idea of systems and strategies and simple and you know, keeping it as simple as possible. So yes, busy people, you are my people too. Can you explain how the chaining process works in detail? I feel like I kind of did that. What if my child has a strong resistance to new foods? Yeah, so fading. So if you have a child who's really resistant to new foods, it's because they're needing to break through rigidity. And sometimes a lot of it is understanding that the first step to overcoming food aversion is actually not even in food. It's actually around breaking through rigidity around the food itself and the processes of food. So it could be like changing meal times, breakfast for dinner, and etc. Like there's lots of different ways to do this, and we would try one of these at a time to see which ones are successful. And then we go through the chaining process that I described in the program. Okay, what are some success stories from other nonverbal children in the program? So oftentimes what we see in the program, specifically in the picky eating program, if you have a picky eater, you have a nutritionally deficient child. Like it absolutely is a no-brainer. We have data that shows us this. If we don't eat the nutrients that we need, such as omega-3s, we're not feeding the proper brain development supports that we can't build ourselves. Like we actually can't make omega-3s in the body. And so these are things that help our children to accept messaging, have receptive language and expressive language. So we have a lot of success stories of children, yes, going to verbal. If when picky eating has been addressed, and let's just say we're now like nonverbal to pre-verbal, we'll say, I like to say that most kids get to pre-verbal stage, then we might be looking at more of like a toxicity issue, and that's where people can upgrade into the other program and get this get $1,000 off the program. Basically, it's like they're not even paying anything extra. And then if they choose to keep going with the detoxes and the other processes and gut restoration, they can. And they haven't lost anything. If anything, they've just gotten ready and started the program at a time where it made more sense for them financially, and then moved on into the other program. All right, what kind of support will I receive if we encounter setbacks if my child regresses? So if your child, this is would be a very rare thing when overcoming picky eating, although transitions happen and natural regressions happen in the world and in our children. And also knowing that as children have more awareness, it is normal to get very like minute, I don't even want to call them regressions. Some people see them as regressions, but we don't. And usually they're what we call transition periods, and they're very like short. And so because you generally know what that looks like ahead of time, it's very, very supportive. And a lot of families will, like when they describe it to us, we could tell them that everything is great. And yes, of course, you have a ton of support going through it, and adjustments that can be made, and recommendations that can be made, and an entire toolkit, messaging, and coaching calls where we can actually do this. Can we do multiple children at once? Yes. So to my anonymous lovely person, we can. So it's one program, covers the whole family. You can even do your literal husband like I did. And we do have some families that do. They're like, as a mom, I was cooking 3 dinners. I'm not alone. I learned very quickly by sharing that shameful moment that I was among many. And so if we can get, yes, as many of the children that we can bring in, it's still going to be a similar process though, as to understanding what is working best for each of them. You kind of have to mold the process to each of your children. They generally do have differences, but there always is, I'm not going to lie, one that's easier than the other. Right. But of course you can absolutely do it. We have some kids that come in, some families that come in with a child with severe autism, but then once they've supported them through picky eating and they have another child, they're like, well, actually my daughter is also a picky eater. Can I do the same process? Of course. Like we look at this, especially for lifetime access, you actually have the ability to overcome picky eating for all your children all together in the process together that we would support. Okay, is there guidance on specific foods that support brain development? Yes, we have a power list in there. So if you wanted to be really intentional and like, this is how easy this looks, you create your sensory profile on the sheet that we provide for you. And then once you know what your child is almost willing to accept easily, and the textures and the heat and all the things, then you can look at the power list and be like, okay, well, that is a good one for this. And we do offer specific brain development supports right from the get-go. My goal is for you to be successful. When you are successful, more people will join this program and be more successful, which means I will have, done my mission in the world, which is to make our children or help our children live the life of their dreams. So yes, I want you to be successful. We give you everything you need to be successful, including brain development supports, opening up detox supports, and feeding the gut microbe supports. Even just from the beginning in this program, it's important to have like foundations built. Think of it as the foundations. Okay, how does the program address sensory processing issues that affect eating habits? So yeah, that's a huge portion of it. Surprisingly, many of the foods that we eat that are creating the sensory processing, or that we're not eating, that are creating sensory processing, it's usually one of two things. We're blocking sensory receptors or with toxicity, or we're not building them out properly. And fun thing is that many of these foods taste like nothing and are so easy to add to other foods that we have a really good system for that as well. This question must have been asked before I announced the lifetime access. So yes, of course, there are extended supports after 12 months for if this is ever a video and is being rewatched. Of course, we have extended supports. I think we had decided on a very low cost of $39 per month for 6 coaching calls is very, very fair. Should people feel they need it, like let's just say they have ARFID and they're seeing some successes, so they know they want to keep going. Absolutely. Oh yeah, and for our guarantee, I realized that I didn't dive into that, but if by chance you don't see a lowered score in 6 months, we actually increase the coaching to more personalized coaching. And then in 12 months, if families have not seen a reduction in that score, they can ask for a refund. Okay, what if my child has other health concerns like gut issues or allergies? This is a great question. Will the program still work? So the answer is yes. So we're not stuck on like one food or one magic flower in the middle of the desert that's going to help everyone. We actually have, like, that's the beauty of food. Many foods hold the nutrients we need to build the brain. That's why back in the day when the grocery store was 90% good, we didn't have to think about it. We didn't need a guide. So yes, if your child has allergies or sensitivities, we can absolutely work with those and around those. Can you explain how the 4 E's are incorporated into daily routines? What if my child resists the changes in routine? Well, the beauty of the 4 E's is mostly they're for us as adults. 50%, I would say that more than 50% is adult mindset work. And then like the other percentage is the strategy. So the 4 E's are more for us to incorporate. And yes, many people will not do all four at once. They will literally just build one in or two in, and then they're going to layer the rest in once they feel they have the others down in a really good system. Because for some people, it's going to be like having to do a full check-in before dinner emotionally, and like creating a habit around, okay, like, am I like this right now, or am I like this right now, or am I smiling like the girl in the picture, or am I the, Natalie Trainwreck that is like petrified to serve food. So there's a lot of things that are simple implementations, but it's about building habits, right? And some habits that will give us the biggest success are just as easy not to do as they are easy to do. What can I expect in terms of my child's sensory sensitivities and meltdowns by using this approach? So again, like if your child is struggling with potty training, meltdowns, or gut issues, constipation, they are almost always nutritional deficiencies. And usually meltdowns are one of the first things that people will notice a calming come from. And meltdowns sometimes are lack of communication and frustration. So there are ways. And we also have like Jen, who is in the program, is amazing, or who is the community manager, is amazing with transitions. We have a team, like it's myself and a team that are literally, each of our team members is stronger in one area than the other. And the focus is on making sure that we have supports that are helping with families with transitions and behaviors, and kind of figuring out whether things are nutritional deficiencies versus behavior issues. And sometimes if you only have one child on the spectrum, what is looking like not necessarily a meltdown, but let's just say a behavior, is also very normal in neurotypical kids. This is a great question. Do we cut foods from the program? Not at the beginning. The whole process is really important to be molded to a child to transition easily. So we do have a lot of people who ask, will we have to go gluten and dairy free? My answer is, you don't have to do anything. Like, I'm not here to smack your hand. What I will do is educate you on why those things are good and how to do it effectively, so that it's not like impossible for you to do the program. The whole point of the program is to mold it so that if your child is eating a heavily gluten and dairy consumed diet, it's to transition them to better choices. Now, that would be the only two foods that we do kind of recommend sliding and fading out. Otherwise, no, it could actually mold to any religion, any way of eating. So we have vegetarians, vegans, omnivores. The only person I can't support is carnivore, because you're already eliminating every food we could enter. So at that point, but yeah, like keto families who have kids that have seizures, we can support any of those families. We are not limited, because the focus is on transitioning from very processed foods to whole foods to intentional foods for specific outcomes. But generally, it's about bringing stuff in that pushes the bad stuff out. I hope that answers that question. So yeah, we try really hard not to cut foods out. Gluten and dairy are the most inflammatory foods in the world. When I did my detox program, specifically, even for adults, like when I learned that we do 4-part detoxes, which is like basically a month of slowly preparing the body for a 1-week intensive. And week 2 is always about taking the most inflammatory foods out, and they are gluten and dairy. So we do work with your kids to transition them, but it doesn't look like taking them out right away, like all at once. Okay, do you have any suggestions for transitioning my child from processed foods to healthier options without resistance? Yeah, that's what the whole program's about. You are welcome. I suggest you come in. It's all about fun. The resistance portion is usually when we're pushing against a boundary too hard and not addressing the physical aspect, which is nutritional deficiencies. Okay. And I think that's the last question. How can I get my family involved? Oh, I love that. So, and everyone supports the approach at dinner time. So, or at mealtime. So yeah, so the truth is that we do know that there is a lot of resistance in our world. The world is just starting to wake up to the nutrition aspect, or that picky eating is not normal. And that we do need to support our children, and the data is showing it. So we are the trailblazers in this case. And so, of course, influence, persuasion in a healthy way without destroying relationships is very important, while still being an advocate for your family. So there's a way of doing this very, very, very effectively, but yet also while saving and actually in many cases bridging relationships to actual deeper fulfillment. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so that's what we really like to do is promote that. Okay, so with that being said, I cannot wait to see those of you in the program. I am very excited that so many of you stayed till the end, and I will see you in our coaching calls. Bye, everybody.